My name is Sophia Chen, and I was 33 years old when I learned that some people will choose a vacation over your hospital bed, and the stranger who sits with you through the worst night of your life might be the father you were told never existed. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the sound of my own voice mid-sentence during the quarterly presentation. I was standing in front of 47 people in the main conference room at Everett & Associates, explaining the new client retention strategy I had spent 6 weeks developing, when the words just stopped coming. Not because I forgot what to say, but because my chest felt like someone had wrapped steel bands around it and was pulling them tighter with every breath. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I needed to finish the slide, that everyone was waiting, that I couldn't be the person who fell apart in the middle of a presentation. Then I remember the floor coming up very fast, and after that, nothing. I woke up in the ICU at Boston General 47 hours later. The nurse told me I had experienced acute heart failure brought on by severe exhaustion and undiagnosed stress cardiomyopathy. My potassium levels had bottomed out. My heart had essentially been running on fumes for months, maybe longer, until it finally gave out during a moment when my blood pressure spiked. The doctor, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okafor with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice, told me I was lucky someone at the meeting knew CPR, that I had been clinically dead for 90 seconds, that if I had been alone, driving, in my apartment, anywhere but surrounded by people who could call 911, I probably would not have made it. I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to process the word dead, tried to understand that my body had quit on me so completely that my heart had actually stopped beating. The first person I called was my mother, Claire. My phone had been in my purse when I collapsed, and someone from work had brought it to the hospital. My hands shook as I pulled up her contact. It was November 19th. Thanksgiving was in 2 days. My parents and my younger brother Ethan had been planning to drive up from Connecticut to spend the holiday weekend in Boston with me. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright. "Sophia, I was just thinking about you. We're trying to decide what time to leave Thursday morning. Traffic is always terrible on Thanksgiving, Mom." My voice came out hoarse, scraped raw from the breathing tube they had pulled out an hour earlier. "I'm in the hospital." Silence. Then, carefully, what happened? I told her. The collapse, the AQ, the heart failure, the doctor's words about how close it had been. I kept my voice as steady as I could, but my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. When I finished, there was a long pause, long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. "Mom?" "Sophia." She sounded stressed, which made sense, but also, and this was the part that made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my heart, she sounded annoyed. "This is terrible timing." I blinked at the ceiling. "Timing? We've had this Hawaii trip planned for 8 months. Your father used his vacation days. We already paid for the flights and the resort. It's non-refundable." For a moment, I thought I had misheard, that the medication was making me confused. "You're going to Hawaii?" "We leave Thursday morning. We'll be back the following Tuesday. I'm sure you'll be out of the hospital by then, and we can visit when we get back. You have good insurance, right? They're taking care of you?" I stared at the phone in my hand like it was a foreign object. "I almost died, Mom." "I know, sweetheart, and that must have been so scary. But you're okay now. The doctors have you. And honestly, there's nothing we could do if we came up there anyway. You'll probably just be sleeping most of the time, recovering. We'd just be sitting around worrying." My father's voice came through in the background, muffled. "Is she okay? Tell her we'll bring her back something nice from Maui." Something nice from Maui. I was in the EQ with a heart that had stopped beating, and they were discussing souvenir options. "I have to go," I said quietly. "Okay, honey, we'll call you from the resort. Get some rest. Love you." The line went dead before I could respond. I set the phone down on the bedside table very carefully. My hands had stopped shaking. That should have felt like progress, but instead it felt like something inside me had gone very still and very cold. A nurse came in to check my vitals. She saw my face and asked if I was in pain. I told her no. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. That night, a man I had never seen before walked into my room carrying a small bouquet of daisies in a plastic grocery store wrapper. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver hair and eyes that were the exact same shade of brown as mine. He stopped just inside the doorway like he was afraid to come closer. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know visiting hours are technically over, but the nurse said..." He stopped. Swallowed. "I'm Caleb. Caleb Winslow. I heard about what happened. I wanted to make sure you were okay." I stared at him. "Do I know you?" "No." He looked down at the flowers like he had just realized he was holding them. "No, you don't. I'm sorry. This is strange. I should go. It's okay." I didn't know why I said it. Maybe because I had been alone in that room for hours and the idea of more silence felt unbearable. "You can stay, if you want." He stayed. We didn't talk much that first night. He sat in the chair by the window and asked if I needed anything. Water. Extra blankets. The TV remote, small, simple things that made the room feel less like a place where I had almost died and more like a place where someone cared whether I was comfortable. He came back the next night. And the night after that. Always with flowers. Always asking the same quiet questions. How was I feeling? Had the doctors said anything new? Did I need him to call anyone? On the third night, Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with Instagram notifications. My mother had posted a photo of my father holding a Mai Tai on a beach at sunset. The caption read, "Grateful for this view and this man. Happy Thanksgiving from paradise." The next post was my brother Ethan grinning in front of a waterfall. Thankful for family adventures and island vibes. I stared at those photos for a long time. At their smiles, at the palm trees and the turquoise water, and the tropical drinks with little umbrellas, at the word family. I was still staring when Caleb walked in carrying a container of soup from the hospital cafeteria. "I know it's not turkey," he said apologetically, "but I thought you might want something warm." I looked at this stranger who had sat with me for 3 nights in a row, who brought me soup on Thanksgiving while my actual family posted vacation photos, and something in my chest cracked open. "Why are you here?" I asked. He set the soup down carefully. "Because you shouldn't be alone. You don't even know me." "No," he said quietly, "but I'd like to, if that's okay." Before I could answer, the door opened and my nurse, Patricia, came in with her tablet. She smiled at Caleb like they were old friends. "Mr. Winslow, you're here again. You're going to make the other patients jealous with all those flowers." She came over to check my IV line, then made a note on her tablet. "Your visitor log is looking good, honey." Nice to see family showing up. I frowned. "Visitor log?" Patricia nodded toward the whiteboard on the wall across from my bed. "We keep track of who comes to see patients in the ICU. Helps us know who to contact if there are any changes, who has permission to get updates, that sort of thing." I had been too out of it to notice the board before. Now I looked at it properly. My name was written at the top in blue marker, Sophia Chen, room 4187. Below that was a list of dates and names. November 19th, Nora Reyes. My father sent me 4 letters every day when I was in the hospital. I read that word 4 times before it fully registered. Father. I looked at Patricia. "There's a mistake." "That should say..." I stopped. Because what should it say? Friend? Stranger? I didn't even know. Patricia checked her tablet and frowned slightly. No mistake, honey. That's how he signed in. Caleb Winslow, father. She looked between us. Is that not right? I turned to look at Caleb. He had gone very pale, staring at the whiteboard like it had betrayed him. I can explain, he said quietly. Patricia, sensing the shift in the room back toward the door, I'll give you two some privacy. When we were alone, Caleb didn't sit down. He stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, looking more uncomfortable than I had ever seen him. 33 years ago, he said finally, I was 24 years old and in love with a woman named Claire Hartley. We weren't married. We weren't even engaged. But when she told me she was pregnant, I was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. I told her I wanted to keep the baby, that we'd figure it out together. My hands had started shaking again. Not from the medication this time. Claire's parents didn't approve. I didn't have money. I was working construction jobs, barely keeping my head above water. Her father was a lawyer. Her mother came from old Connecticut money. They thought she could do better. She probably could have. He took a breath, still not looking at me. When Claire was 7 months pregnant, her father, your grandfather Martin, came to see me at the job site where I was working. He told me Claire had lost the baby. Miscarriage at 6 months. He said she was devastated and needed space to grieve. He said the best thing I could do was leave her alone. Let her heal. I already knew where this was going, but I couldn't make myself interrupt. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was her father. He had no reason to lie about something like that. So I left her alone. I moved to New Hampshire for work. Tried to move on. It took me years to stop thinking about the baby we lost. His voice cracked slightly. The daughter I thought had died before I ever got to meet her. When did you find out? I whispered. 3 weeks ago. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were wet. I was having dinner with an old friend in Boston. She works in medical billing at this hospital. She mentioned a young woman named Sophia Chen had been admitted to the cardiac unit. Described you. Dark hair, brown eyes, worked for some consulting firm. She said something about your emergency contact being your mother, Claire Chen, formerly Claire Hartley from Westport, Connecticut. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was old, faded, the kind that had been scanned from a printed picture. A young woman with dark hair and my exact same smile. Next to her stood a young man with silver brown hair and eyes the same shade as mine. That was us, he said. 6 months before your grandfather told me you had died. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. Not because of my heart this time, but because everything I thought I knew about my family had just reorganized itself into a completely different shape. I'm not here to disrupt your life, Caleb said quickly. I know you have a family, a father who raised you. I'm not trying to replace anyone or claim anything. But when I heard you were here, alone, he stopped. I couldn't stay away. I needed to see that you were real, that you were okay. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. A text from my mother. Having the most amazing time. Snorkeling tomorrow. Hope you're feeling better. We'll call when we can. Attached was a photo of her and my father, Martin, the man who had looked me in the eye my entire life, knowing he had lied to my biological father about my existence, holding tropical drinks, grinning. I looked at that photo. Then I looked at Caleb, who had been sitting in this hospital room every single night because he couldn't bear the thought of me being alone, who had brought flowers and soup and quiet company, who had signed the visitor log with a title he had been denied for 33 years. Tell me about yourself, I said. He blinked. What? You know my name. You know I work in consulting. You know I almost died 3 days ago. But I don't know anything about you. I set my phone face down. Tell me about yourself. Please." He sat down slowly, like he was afraid I might change my mind, and then he talked. About his life in New Hampshire, about the construction company he eventually started, about his love of hiking and terrible jokes and old westerns, about how he never married because he could never quite move past the loss of the daughter he thought he'd never meet. We talked until Patricia came back to kick him out at the end of visiting hours. Before he left, I asked him for his phone number. "Will you come back tomorrow?" I asked. His smile was tentative but genuine. "If you want me to." "I do." After he left, I lay in the dark and thought about everything I had just learned. About the man who had raised me knowing he had stolen me from someone else. About the mother who had chosen a vacation over her daughter's ICU bed. About the family I had been funding for years, without ever questioning why I was always the one they called when they needed something, but never the one they thought about when they had something to celebrate. I pulled up my banking app and opened the spreadsheet I had been maintaining in a separate folder. Private, password protected, never shared with anyone. 6 years of payments. $156,400. Emergency after emergency that somehow always seemed to coincide with new purchases, vacation bookings, and expenses that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with comfort. I had told myself I was helping. That family helped family. That being the one with the stable job and no husband and no kids meant I was supposed to carry the weight. But family, real family, didn't lie about your existence for 33 years. Real family didn't choose a resort in Maui over your hospital bed. Real family showed up with grocery store flowers and cafeteria soup and sat with you because the alternative was leaving you alone. I opened my text messages and pulled up the thread with my father. Martin, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and walked me down the aisle at my college graduation. The man who had lied to Caleb's face and stolen 3 decades that should have been theirs. "I know about Caleb," I typed. "I know what you told him. I know everything." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came 30 seconds later. "We can explain. This is complicated. Your mother and I made the best decision we could at the time." I stared at those words. The best decision we could. As if lying about a baby's death was a reasonable choice. As if denying a father his child for 33 years was something that could be explained away with the right words. I typed one more message. "Don't contact me again." Then I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's number. Then I blocked my brother's number. I opened my banking app and removed my card from every automatic payment I had ever set up for them. The house insurance, the property taxes, the family phone plan, the warehouse club membership, my brother's gym membership that he promised he'd totally take over next month 18 months ago. Every single one. Gone. I enabled 2-factor authentication on all my accounts, changed every password, logged out every device except my own phone and laptop. Then I opened the folder labeled Family Expenses and saved 3 copies of the spreadsheet. One on my hard drive, one in the cloud, one that I would print and keep in a physical folder the moment I got home. $156,400 over 6 years. An average of $26,000 a year, $2,166 a month, $72 every single day for 6 years straight. Money I had sent because they made their problems sound urgent and my solutions sound temporary. Because they made me believe that helping them was what good daughters did. Because every time I questioned whether this was normal, they reminded me that family took care of family, but they had never taken care of me. By the time I was released from the hospital 5 days later, my phone had 43 missed calls from unknown numbers, voicemails from my mother's friends, texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. A Facebook message from my aunt demanding I call her immediately. I deleted all of it without reading or listening. Caleb picked me up from the hospital. He had asked if I wanted him to, and I had said yes without hesitation. He carried my bag to his car and drove carefully, like I was made of glass. He had already stocked my apartment with groceries, things the doctor said would be good for my recovery. Leafy greens, lean proteins, foods I wouldn't have to cook if I didn't have energy. You didn't have to do this, I said, standing in my kitchen looking at the full refrigerator. I wanted to, he said simply. Over the next 3 weeks, Caleb came by every few days. Not to intrude, not to demand answers or make up for lost time, just to check in, to make sure I was eating, to sit with me while I worked through the anger and grief and confusion of learning that my entire childhood had been built on a lie. He told me about the calls he'd been getting too. From Martin, from Claire, demanding he stay away from their daughter, threatening legal action, accusing him of manipulation. Are you? I asked one night over takeout Chinese food in my living room. Manipulating me? He looked at me for a long moment. No, but if you ever feel like I am, I need you to tell me. I'll walk away if that's what you need. I don't want you to walk away. Then I won't. In early December, my mother sent a certified letter to my apartment. It was 3 pages long, full of explanations and justifications and pleas for understanding. She called Caleb unstable and opportunistic. She said they had lied to protect me, that Caleb had been dangerous back then, that I was being reckless and emotional and throwing away my real family for a stranger. The last paragraph was a request, thinly veiled as an ultimatum. If you continue this relationship with Caleb, you are choosing to destroy this family. Your father is heartbroken. Your brother doesn't understand why you're doing this. I'm begging you to come home for Christmas so we can work through this like adults. But if you choose Caleb over us, we cannot continue to have a relationship with you. The choice is yours. I read that letter twice. Then I called my friend Nora, the one who had visited me in the ICU that first terrible day. Nora was an attorney who specialized in family law and financial abuse cases. Can they actually do anything legally? I asked. About Caleb? Do they have any proof he's harmed you or coerced you in any way? No. Because he hasn't. Then no. You're a 33-year-old adult. You can have a relationship with whomever you choose. They can threaten all they want, but they have no legal standing. I asked her to look at the spreadsheet, to tell me if what my family had done qualified as financial exploitation. She called me back 2 hours later. Sophia, this is textbook financial abuse. They created dependency by conditioning you to believe their crises were your responsibility. They normalized taking from you while giving nothing in return. And now that you've stopped, they're not apologizing. They're threatening you and blaming you for consequences they created. This isn't family. This is exploitation. I wrote one response to my mother's letter, by hand, on actual paper, because I wanted her to have to hold something physical when she read it. You lied to Caleb about my existence for 33 years. You chose a vacation in Hawaii over visiting me in the iku when my heart stopped. You have taken $156,400 from me in 6 years and never once asked if I could afford it or if I needed anything in return. Caleb has asked for nothing. He has given me honesty, presence, and respect. You're right that I'm making a choice. But you're wrong about what I'm choosing. I'm choosing truth over lies. I'm choosing people who show up over people who show up for money. I'm choosing the father who sat with me in the hospital over the father who told another man his daughter was dead. Do not contact me again. I mailed it with no return address. By January, the consequences had started to cascade. Without my monthly payments, My parents' property taxes went into arrears. The family phone plan suspended. My mother's credit card, the one I had been making minimum payments on for 2 years, defaulted. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my brother's car had been repossessed because the insurance lapsed and he had been driving uninsured. That my father had taken out a second mortgage on the house to cover expenses. I felt sad about it in the same distant way you feel sad watching a building burn down that you used to live in but evacuated from years ago. They had made their choices. I had made mine. In March, I started seeing a therapist, not because I was broken, but because I needed help processing the fact that the people who raised me had built my entire childhood on a foundation of lies, that they had stolen a father from me and stolen me from him, and then expected me to be grateful for it. My therapist asked me once why I thought I had been responsible for my family's financial stability. I told her the same thing I had told myself for years, that I had the stable job, that I didn't have kids or a mortgage, that helping was what family did. She asked me a different question. Did they ever help you? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about every achievement they had minimized, every crisis of mine they had ignored, every birthday they had forgotten because someone else needed something. No, I said finally, they didn't help me, they used me, and when you stopped being useful, what happened? They tried to make me feel guilty. They threatened me. They made it my fault that their lives fell apart. Because the problem was never your support, she said gently. The problem was the foundation they built on top of your silence. I started a financial literacy workshop in April for women in their late 20s and early 30s. Not because I wanted to be a teacher, but because I kept meeting people with the same exhausted look I used to see in my own mirror. People who didn't know how to say no. People who had been taught that boundaries were selfish. I told them what I wished someone had told me, that you don't owe anyone access to your bank account just because you share Dina, that helping should feel like a choice, not a sentence, that if removing financial support causes someone's life to collapse, the problem was never your support. I spent Thanksgiving that year with Caleb. We went hiking in New Hampshire and had dinner at a small restaurant that served terrible turkey and perfect mashed potatoes. We talked about everything and nothing, about the years we lost and the years we were building. My phone didn't ring. My mother didn't send a card, my father didn't text, and I felt the kind of peace that only comes when you stop waiting for people to love you the way you deserve, and start building a life where you don't need them to. Caleb and I are still learning each other, still figuring out what this relationship looks like when you have 3 decades of missed time to work through. But we're figuring it out together, with honesty, with presence, with the kind of love that shows up even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient, the truth I learned is this: biology doesn't make someone your parent. Raising you doesn't make someone your parent. Showing up when it matters, that's what makes someone your parent. And sometimes the family you were born into is not the family you were meant to find. I don't regret what I did. I regret how long it took me to do it. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, let me tell you something important. You are not responsible for funding other people's lies. You are not selfish for protecting your future. And people who choose vacations over your hospital bed are not your family. They're just people you used to know who happened to raise you. Family is the person who shows up with grocery store flowers when you're alone in the ICU. Family is the truth, even when it's 33 years late. Everything else is just biology and habit. Our team at Revenge Broken Trust is working hard to create meaningful, emotional, and well-crafted stories that teach valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth. This story is fictional, and created for educational purposes, designed to help viewers recognize financial exploitation and understand that real family shows up when it matters most. If you were in Sophia's position, would you have chosen the father who lied or the father who showed up? Let me know in the comments, because these conversations matter. And if this story helped you see something you needed to see, please share it. Someone else might need to hear that they're allowed to choose honesty over history.